You've probably looked up at the night sky before. Beyond that dark sky, a place with no air and no sound. For a long time, humans wanted to go there. But at first, we knew nothing. Whether you could breathe up there, whether a heart could keep beating, no one knew. So humans chose other lives to send down that path first. A single small fly, a stray dog, monkeys and chimpanzees strapped into their seats without understanding why. A cat that had wandered the alleys of Paris. None of them knew where they were going. They didn't even know if they could come back. Tonight, this is the story of the small creatures who walked that path first, before humans ever reached space. Feel free to lean back and just listen. The story will move along slowly. It begins in 1947 in the deserts of New Mexico, a place called White Sands, where white sands stretched on without end. Here stood a rocket that had come over from Germany. It was once a weapon built to destroy cities, but now it would be used to peer beyond the sky. February 20th, 1947. At the tip of this rocket rode some very tiny passengers. Fruit flies. These little insects have a lot in common with us. They share a large part of their genes with humans, which made them perfect for studying the effects of radiation. The rocket climbed to about 109 kilometers up, which means these fruit flies were the very first living things from Earth to reach space. The small capsule opened its parachute and drifted slowly down to the desert. When the scientists opened it, the fruit flies were unharmed. That space radiation doesn't kill life instantly. This was the first moment that showed it. But just because insects survived didn't mean a larger animal could. So the next one sent up was a monkey. June 14th, 1949. A monkey named Albert II rose to about 134 kilometers. He became the first mammal ever to reach space. Albert II survived the flight itself, but on the way back, his parachute failed to open. The capsule struck the ground, and Albert II died from the impact. There were many other monkeys, both before him and after. Most of them, never even properly named, did not come back alive. Before any glorious tale of heroes, there were these small deaths first. And then, in 1957, on the other side of the world, a single dog steps into history. 1957, in Moscow, the capital of the Soviet Union. On the streets, ownerless dogs were surviving the bitter winter. Soviet scientists deliberately sought out these strays. They believed a dog that had endured cold and hunger would better endure the harshness of space. And so one small dog was chosen. A female weighing just over 5 kilograms. People called her Laika. It meant the barker. That October, the Soviets launched Sputnik 1, humanity's first artificial satellite. The whole world was stunned. The Soviet leader wanted another satellite up within a month. He wanted it to match the 40th anniversary of the revolution. There was far too little time. There was no time to build a new satellite properly, so Sputnik 2 was assembled in a hurry. And inside it, they decided to place a living passenger, Laika. Here, one fact has to be said clearly. Sputnik 2 had no way of bringing Laika back. The technology to return safely through the atmosphere didn't exist yet. In other words, Laika's flight was a one-way path from the very start. The scientists knew it too. November 3rd, 1957. Sputnik 2, carrying Laika, lifts off. At the moment of launch, Laika's heart beat more than 3 times its normal rate. But once she reached orbit, the records show her breathing settled for a while. Laika became the first living thing to orbit the Earth. For a long time, the world was told that Laika had lived for several days. That's what the Soviets announced. But the truth was different. It wasn't until 2002 that one of the scientists from the flight revealed it. The temperature control system hadn't worked properly. The temperature inside the capsule rose quickly, Laika passed away just hours after launch, around her fourth orbit of the Earth. Not days, hours. The empty satellite kept circling the Earth quietly for 5 more months. And in April 1958, it fell into the atmosphere and burned away. Years later, one of the scientists involved confessed his regret, that they hadn't learned enough to justify the loss of a single life. Today in Moscow, a small monument stands in Laika's honor. Laika never came home, but the data she left behind told us a great deal. That a living animal could survive a launch and live for a while even in weightlessness. And that fact set people in motion on the other side of the world. After Laika's flight, the Soviet scientists carried a heavy heart. That sending a living creature into space should never depend on its death. Now their goal became clear: to bring back alive the life they sent into space. But that path wasn't smooth either. In the summer of 1960, a rocket carrying 2 dogs exploded just after launch. The 2 lives inside never reached the sky. But the scientists didn't stop. And a month later, 2 more dogs are made ready. Stray females, around 2 years old, brought in from the streets of Moscow. One had white fur and was named Belka, meaning squirrel. The other was Strelka, a name meaning little arrow. The 2 dogs spent many months together. They were trained. They grew used to tight spaces, endured violent shaking, and learned to eat food that came out automatically. The people who trained them grew deeply attached to these dogs. They spent every day with. On August 19, 1960, Sputnik 5, carrying Belka and Strelka, lifts off. And it wasn't just the 2 of them. 40 mice and 2 rats, a rabbit, flies, and even several plants rode along. Like a small ark, many lives headed into space together. Inside the capsule were devices to regulate oxygen, absorb carbon dioxide, and monitor body temperature and heartbeat. There was one difference from Laika's flight. This capsule was built to come back. In the control room on the ground, people held their breath and waited for a signal. Then a sound came through from the capsule, the sound of a dog barking. One researcher said, "It isn't howling, it's barking. And if so, they'll come back alive." Belka and Strelka circled the Earth for a full day. 17 orbits, a flight of more than 25 hours. And at last, the capsule's retro rockets ignited. The landing capsule opened its parachute and drifted slowly down toward the Earth. When the capsule was opened, Belka and Strelka were alive. The mice that left with them, the rabbit, all those small lives, every one of them was safe. They were the first living things to go to space and come back alive. The 2 stray dogs became heroes known to the whole world overnight. And not long after, Strelka gave birth to 6 healthy puppies. One of them was sent across the ocean to America. The Soviet leader gave it as a gift to the young, daughter of the American president. Between 2 nations standing coldly against each other, a single puppy built a little bridge. The moment Belka and Strelka came home safely, the Soviet scientists gained their certainty. The certainty that they could send a living creature into space and bring it back. Less than a year after this flight, a single person sets out on the same path. A path that 2 small dogs had traveled first, now followed by a human. Even today, in a museum in Moscow, Belka and Strelka are preserved as the story of 2 small dogs who left for space and came back alive. If the Soviets put dogs into orbit, America decided to send an animal closer to humans. A chimpanzee? Chimpanzees are very much like us. With training, they could follow simple movements. We had to find out whether a person could really move their hands and operate machines in space. At a base in New Mexico, 40 young chimpanzees were trained to pull a lever when a light came on, something they learned slowly over several months. One of them was chosen. He was given the name Ham. It came from the name of the lab that ran his training. At the time, Ham was only 3.5 years old.